This is Becoming UnDone.
It's a pretty story on the other side, because now I can sit here and say, ooh, that gave me grit. Ooh, that gave me resilience. But in the moment, it was tough. Old me would have stuffed it away. But those lessons of, no, like something is off and you're not getting it. I was really struggling with everything, some PTSD that had happened during COVID and with imposter syndrome at work. I really struggled. All those things combined, it just led us apart. And so we ended up getting divorced. One day on a Sunday afternoon, I'd actually taken a nap on his couch while he was doing stuff with the kids earlier. I just woke up and I felt different. And we sat at the pool that day, and I looked at him and I kind of went through the checklist in my head of everything I was looking for in a life partner and who I was. And then I realized, you're who I'm looking for.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Becoming UnDone, the podcast for high achievers who don't let setbacks stand in the way of massive success. I'm your host, Dr. Toby Brooks, a speaker, author, and professor, but maybe most importantly, a relentless learner, fascinated by what makes high achievers tick. And let me tell you, I'm thrilled you're joining me today. For over 2 decades, I've worked as an athletic trainer and a strength coach, from the high school to the pro sports settings. I've seen the wins, the losses, the moments that fall somewhere in between, the heartbreaking setbacks, the inspiring comebacks, and all the stories in the middle. Becoming UnDone is a space for those who dare bravely, risk mightily, and grow relentlessly. Each episode, I bring you a new guest to explore how failures and adversity can become the fuel that power us to success. While lots of us have been programmed to avoid failure at all costs and to never talk about them in the event that they do happen, here we lean in hard and we learn the powerful lessons that they can teach us. This show is my way of sharing insights into the mindsets of high achievers, lessons that can not only inspire us, but also equip us with strategies to navigate our own journeys so we can understand what it means to truly become undone and come back stronger. I'd like to emphasize that this show is entirely separate from my role at Baylor University. It's my attempt to apply what I've learned and what I'm learning and to share with others about the mindsets of high achievers. You know, it's been a minute since I've joined you here. Truth is, although I haven't been dropping new episodes on Becoming UnDone, I have still been releasing new episodes on my brand new solo short-form podcast, The Professor's Playbook. You can find that show anywhere you can find this one. So if you're interested in shorter episodes and quick, actionable tips on learning and growth, maybe check that one out. But back over here on the mothership, I have a real treat for you today. Although I think I say that about every guest, and it's true. But the story of Brittany Bankhead is absolutely phenomenal to me. If you met her today, you'd think she's bright, she's young, she's a highly successful surgeon. She's got a growing presence as a social media influencer, not to mention balancing her roles as a wife and a mom. You'd be tempted to think someone like Dr. Bankhead has it all together, and you'd be right. But it hasn't always been that simple. When it comes to resilience, purpose, and making an impact in the face of adversity, few people embody those traits quite like Brittany. She isn't just a trailblazer in her field. She's a beacon of hope and determination for those following in her footsteps or serving beside her as they navigate their own uncharted waters. In this conversation, we'll dive deep into Brittany's story. We'll talk about her path to becoming a surgeon, the defining moments that have shaped her perspective, and the lessons she's learned about grit, purpose, and the importance of staying true to yourself, even in the most difficult circumstances. Whether you're in medicine, education, business, or just looking for a dose of inspiration, I think you'll find that Dr. Brittany Bankhead's story will resonate with you on a profound level. So grab your headphones, settle in, get ready for another powerful conversation here on Becoming UnDone, episode 108 with Dr. Brittany Bankhead. Joining me today is Dr. Brittany Bankhead, a renowned trauma surgeon, educator, researcher, entrepreneur, you name it. Her work's been at the forefront of medicine and public health. She spent her career literally saving lives in some of the most high-pressure, high-stakes environments imaginable, and we'll get into that. But her story doesn't stop at the OR. It doesn't stop at the ER. Her journey has been shaped by unique challenges. She's a leader, a mentor, and just an awesome human. So, Dr. Bankhead, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks, Toby. I mean, I might come back more often if I'm going to get an intro like that.
Yeah. Well, we were talking a little bit off camera before the show, and you and I go back a few years, worked on some cool things together in your entrepreneurial space. And I wanted to tell your story then, but so much has happened. So I'm really glad that we get to dig in. I always start with just kind of an easy one to get us rolling. What did you want to be growing up and why?
Oh, it's kind of lame, I guess, but I always wanted to be a doctor. I think when I was in pre-K, maybe was the only time I didn't want to be a doctor, but I wanted to be a nurse half the day and a teacher half the day because that seemed reasonable. And then after that, I wanted to be a doctor my whole life. I do get to do the teacher half the time thing too because I'm in academics like you. And so I still get to teach a lot. Yeah. So I do. Well,
that's awesome. Your life's a dream come true. You became what you wanted to be. I interviewed my son at one point in his childhood. He wanted to be the king of the world. So it's interesting you've had that clarity from the jump. So with that in mind, you don't get into medical school by just showing up to class. You're a high achiever of high achievers. So talk me through the beginning of your story and where those dreams started to really shape up for you and become a reality.
My story was not super conventional, honestly. I feel I'll backtrack on that a little bit. A lot of what you see publicly and outwardly for people in my profession is this beautiful story that evolves if I worked really hard and I studied and I got good grades and I got good MCAT scores and I went to a wonderful medical school and residency just fell in my lap and here I am. But that is honestly not always the case. And that was not the case for me. I did really great in high school and in undergrad. I took a really big hit in the game of life because I went to Texas A&M and I realized I did not actually know how to study. I had just gotten good grades because I would listen and regurgitate and that worked for me. But it turns out you can't do that for forever. And at some point, it's going to bite you if you don't know how to study. I was having a great time. I graduated a year early, so I was barely 16 when I got my acceptance to Texas A&M. And then I went and I was barely 17. So I had to literally email home a permission form to go on a weekend retreat with some of my friends and this organization. And I learned the hard way and I kind of stuck my head in the sand and I didn't deal with the grades that were coming in and I wasn't failing, but I wasn't doing great and certainly not good enough for medical school. So when the end of college came and it was what are you going to do? My MCAT was not stellar. My undergrad GPA was not stellar. And I was kind of at a fork in the road of, do I keep trying or do I do something else? And my mom always told me, well, what else are you going to do? And I would mention the list of possibilities. And she said, well, is that what you want to be doing during the day? And I would think, no, it's not.
I'm going to do what I do and just wedge myself right in here for a sec, if you don't mind. If you were to meet Brittany today for the first time, I'd predict that you'd walk away with two prevailing thoughts. First, this lady is bright. She's an incredible mind, as evidenced by her numerous and versatile accomplishments as a surgeon, as an entrepreneur, a scholar, an educator. The second thing I'd say is that she's real. Medicine is overflowing with ego. And while Dr. Bankhead clearly has a confidence about her, she's approachable and authentic. It's a refreshing and welcoming combo that is impactful not only for her patients, but for her colleagues, her family, and her friends. But I'll be honest, I didn't know this aspect of her story much before our interview. You heard her mention it. She didn't breeze through undergrad. She didn't ace the MCAT at first, and she didn't land a highly coveted spot in an elite medical school. Not at first, anyway. In a celebratory post on X dated October 26, 2023, a beaming Dr. Bankhead toasts the camera with these words in the tweet, or whatever the hell we call posts on X these days. Quote, "My undergrad pre-med counselor told me I'd never get into medical school, that I should find a different career. Today, I am officially a double board certified academic trauma surgeon. Where there's a will, there's a freaking way. Cheers to you, Karen." End quote. And I'd say with certainty, learning this corner of her story just deepens my respect for my friend. It didn't come easy. She earned it. She worked her tail off. Despite the fact naysayers told her she couldn't, Brittany was determined to prove that she could. And as they say, she believed she could. So she did.
So here I go. I know the answer now. And so I did a master's program. I moved to Miami, where I went to Barry University, and I learned how to study during my master's program. And I figured it out. I retook the MCAT. I applied to medical school again. At this time, I had met my husband, and we were applying together. And I got into medical school, but it was a Caribbean medical school, which, if you're unfamiliar with that, it is still accredited, but not a United States medical school. And so it was much, much more expensive and a lot harder in terms of they would let more people in, but they still had a standard to uphold in terms of the step scores and the other board scores that you would get afterwards. So they just didn't care at all if you failed out. And there was no mentorship. There was no guidance. There was no, let's like save this student at all costs. You were moving to a different country and it was on you to sink or swim. And you were going to be $500,000 in debt by the end of it. So yeah. So I learned the hard way. I went to medical school. I graduated. I then started. So that's kind of where my resiliency starts. And then I realized at first I wanted to be a family medicine doctor. I loved shadowing the one that I did in college. But then I kind of realized in anatomy lab and then throughout my clinical rotations, I wanted to be a surgeon. And it turns out surgical residency is very long and it is hard to get into, especially when you're an international medical graduate. So I couldn't make it easy for myself. And again, my mom asked me, well, what else are you going to do? And I thought, no, I always want to do that. So we applied. My husband and I applied. We tried to couples match. It did not work. We were separated for the beginning of residency. I had our little kiddo in Dallas for what's called a preliminary year, where you kind of get 1 year of residency and then you're off on your own again. He was in New York, then a spot opened up at UT Southwestern. He interviewed and got it. So then he moved to Dallas, and then my year ended. I matched to a categorical position, thankfully, after all my hard work. But that was in Michigan. So then I moved to Michigan and was away from them for 2 years. While I was doing that, first 2 years of surgical residency, I continued to do research with the group back in Texas. And then a spot opened up that program director knew about in Texas at UT Austin. And I made the decision, why wouldn't I do a cross-country lateral move to the program of my dreams? And so as a PGY2, I left and joined the University of Texas at Austin as a PGY3. And then I finished my 6 years of surgical residency, and I applied for fellowship. That's going way more stuff. And so I applied for fellowship. I got into my number one choice at Harvard and the Massachusetts General Program in critical care. And so my stick, whenever I give a grand rounds on this, is from IMG to Ivy League.
Wow.
This was my path.
What a story.
Here we are.
Holy cow. Did you keep up with that whirlwind of life for the Bankheads? After struggling to gain acceptance into a domestic medical school, Brittany's armed with an iron will and the counsel of a supportive, if not persistent mom, who encourages her to look at the bigger picture. Once Brittany realizes that a career as a physician is what she was meant for, she decides to first pursue a master's degree so that she can improve her study skills and get her test scores up. When that still isn't quite enough, she decides to go to medical school in the Caribbean at Ross University School of Medicine in Barbados. It's a bold move, where she not only has to move thousands of miles from home, she racks up incredible debt in the process. It was a gamble on herself, and it paid off. By the time she hit residencies and you heard her refer to PGYs or postgraduate years 2 and 3, she landed coveted spots in both Michigan and eventually UT Austin. And then she applied and was awarded a fellowship at Harvard, one of the most storied, prestigious, and cutting-edge medical schools and medical facilities in all the world. To go from IMG, or International Medical Graduate, to Ivy League in just a few short years was and is nothing short of remarkable. But she was just getting started. Such a tremendous story. I want to go back, though. I'm picturing, precocious little 16-year-old Brittany on a massive, one of the largest campuses, one of the largest enrollments in the world, and you're kind of drowning there. Talk me through what those early lessons and early sensations of failure or setback were like, and how did they help you moving forward? Really, that's an early time to learn those lessons.
Yeah, it really was. And to be honest, I didn't take them as early lessons or early sensations. I was so full of myself, full of my prior abilities, what I had done, that I just assumed it would get better. And I didn't really talk about it with anyone. And I didn't really digest it and try to make my ship go back on the right path. And that was a really wrong thing to do. And I really paid for it down the line. And so now that's a really big, important thing in my life is the mistakes will continue and the hard lessons will come with owning them.
Right. I've interviewed a lot of high achievers, a lot of athletes, a couple of Navy SEALs. People in, I'll call them high ego professions. And I think surgery would qualify as a high ego profession. And what I've discovered is to have those sensations of failure it's human. It's natural to encounter resistance and question self. But in those high ego professions, there's a stigma associated with talking about it. Like if you show your vulnerability and you show weakness, people are all over you. And the irony is they're probably dealing with those same doubts, but they will eat you alive because you talked about them. Going to the Caribbean for medical school, I haven't had guests, but I've had some colleagues in the past who have done that. And, there's kind of some negotiation within self where you're swallowing pride to a certain extent. And like you said, from that to Ivy League is a tremendous, tremendous accomplishment. When you were navigating that time, what were the lessons learned earlier and how were you applying them perhaps differently in swallowing your pride and going that route and seeing this dream come true regardless of the obstacles and adversity that you were facing?
Yeah, at the time, this was the only option afforded to me as the path to get to where I wanted. And it seemed like it certainly was the best option at the time. And I didn't look too far in the future thinking, oh, this is going to be hard afterwards. This is going to be tough afterwards. It was just what was right in front of me. And so at the time, I was really grateful. The difficulties came both in medical school and then subsequently when I realized what I wanted to do afterwards. And really that component of non-hand-holding, it's a pretty story on the other side because now I can sit here and say, oh, that gave me grit. that gave me resilience. I had no one telling me how to get to where I wanted to go. I had volcanic ash on the ground when I would wake up, and I'd have to wear a mask to class. Hurricanes would be coming, and this was a third world country. And so I would have to use candles to study because we were still going to have the test on Monday, and all kinds of stuff. But in the moment, it was tough. And you're dealing with all the other same things as any other medical student too. So my son knows about this example very well, that I got an awful score on one of my second semester biopharmacology tests. It was a 32. It was awful. And old me would have stuffed it away and thought, no, it's going to be fine. I had been doing okay until then. But those lessons of no, something is off and you're not getting it. And I buckled down. I talked with my husband about it. I went in for extra help. I studied my butt off and I pulled that sucker up to a B, and I have never been so grateful for a B. But yeah, it's that translation of the buckle down and the face it head on was paramount.
Yeah. Well, we were talking a little bit before as well about the title and how oftentimes the title of these episodes emerge. And you hit the nail on the head. You said it was a beautiful story after the fact. And I can't think of a better way to describe your journey. So you go from UT, and where our paths cross, I remember reading a story about you talking about COVID and what that meant to healthcare practitioners, physicians in particular. Talk me through what that season of life was like for you, both professionally and personally.
Yep. That was one of the, if not the most formidable time in my life. So I was pretty high on life. I had just graduated surgical residency. I now had 2 kiddos, a boy and a girl. I was married, and we moved to Boston so I could attend fellowship for critical care in an Ivy League institution. It was really, really exciting. Boston was great. It was a total change for our entire family. We had this little loft in Cambridge, and I would walk across the bridge to work every day. And it was just such a privilege to live there and to train there. It was a fun thing for our entire family. It was just great. And I got my groove, fellowship kind of whopped me upside the head like it does, but it's fine. By this time I'm good. I can figure out how it's going to work. We get past the holidays and it gets into February, and there's rumblings. And, everyone around the world had heard rumblings. And so I dealt with them like I've always heard other rumblings. You hear it on the news, people are chatting, whatever. But then the emails started coming, and it was this surreal life of almost living in a movie where it's coming. And I can't even describe it beyond just surreal and it feeling like a movie. So the emails start coming. We're starting to prepare. This is going to happen. And at some point in my mind, it clicks that, wait, I'm an ICU fellow. The ICU is what I do. And I'm in one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. And we're going to get it here. It is going to come here, and it's going to be here. And so fine. Okay. I'm dealing with that. But then there's a conference in Boston called the Biogen Conference. And that was the big outbreak that happened in Boston. And I got to work one night, and in my sign out, there was a patient at our hospital, and they had COVID. And we, as the ICU team and the airway team, were supposed to be evaluating these patients. And I kind of talked about it in one of the articles that I was interviewed about where just, one became 3, became 10, became dozens, and it just completely inundated our hospital and our life. And being a trainee is hard enough. Being a physician is hard enough, but like this was another level of absolute terror and for our safety. Like you're not used to going to work and being scared for your life. And we had no idea what that meant for us. And we were terrified. My husband and I, so much so that, schools were canceled and everything was shut down, and we had to show our pass just walking on the sidewalk because everyone was supposed to be in their homes. And so I, one night, told my mom, like, I feel like the country's about to shut down and our kids aren't safe. And like, if we die or end up on ventilators, my husband's an ER doctor, so we're both seeing those, like, they can't stay here and I cannot be a good mom and do this well. And so I flew them across the country. I flew back, and my husband and I had a list of passwords and like where to find things, and we would tape it to the door inside our apartment so that if we died or if we were on ventilators, then my mom would be able to find them without actually coming into the apartment. And like, it was terrifying.
Yeah. And to go through that when you're also at the same time trying to deliver care to patients.
Yeah.
And
And
learn.
Learn how to do critical care. Yeah.
Right. And so I have to imagine that experience, I mean, you had a generation's worth of patient care experience rolled into a few months there.
Yeah.
And when it's coming in at that pace, it's unsustainable. You're also concerned about your well-being, your family's well-being.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to conclude that season of your life, and where did you go from there?
Yeah. Well, for one, I went to take the board exams for general surgery because, of course there would be a board exam thrown in there for general surgery, and they had to do it virtually, and I had to go buy a new laptop to do it. But that store had been ransacked the night before from other things going on in the country. And so I couldn't buy it was a mess. And then I took 2 weeks off of work and used my own vacation time to study away from my kids, away from everyone. And then the whole platform failed. So that was misery as well. That's kind of how I concluded my fellowship year. And then all of a sudden it was done, and we were, in a swing of things with COVID. And so I moved to Texas then and was really looking forward to not being in the middle of an urban center and not only doing ICU, but like trying to get into my job and do surgery again and be back in Texas. And I was excited.
Yeah. And again, you're a high achiever. You're coming from Harvard. You're established. There's really not much room there for you to grieve, for you to be vulnerable, to talk about and process what just constituted the last year of your life or however long. During that time, how did you navigate the change of new this, new that, new job, new city, new setting for family, and also trying to sort through the emotions and everything that came along with you that you probably would have preferred to have left in Boston?
Yeah. I buried it because that's what a good surgeon does. And we bury it and we don't talk about it, and we press forward and we move on. And you just don't, it's like that. These are hard things, and we do hard things, and we pride ourselves on doing hard things without anyone else seeing that it bothers us. And there's real concern in the medical community about if you start to share anything psychologic related, that it is going to impair your ability to have a state license. Because then it's out there, and then, well, what is the board going to say? And it historically, and even now can be a real hindrance to medical professionals taking care of themselves.
Right. Yeah. And that's such a tragedy because we know that if you're not able to sort through those feelings and you suppress them, then they don't ever get dealt with. And so you're trying to move forward when anyone in that circumstance would have had a real struggle moving forward when you've got so much dragging you back. So you end up at Texas Tech and you're in academic medicine. You're now a mentor instead of a mentee. You become involved in the entrepreneurial side of things. So let's kind of go down that path a little bit and talk about how, it wasn't enough to be a surgeon and a mom and a wife and a mentor. You needed to add entrepreneur on top of that.
Yeah. So while I was in Austin, I was teaching Stop the Bleed, which is a national campaign that was organized after the tragedy at Sandy Hook. And it kind of was this campaign, organized effort to teach regular, everyday people who aren't trained medical professionals how to stop life-threatening hemorrhage. And so I did this training and I realized, I don't know that we're saying we're teaching them, but are they really getting it? And would they really be able, when there's blood squirting in their face and when people are screaming and crying, like, are they really going to be able to do it? And so I worked with an engineering team when I was at UT just for this. I got an email and it said, hey, do you have an idea? The engineering students here want good ideas. And I won this little surgery department thing. And so we worked with them for a year and it was really cool. But then I thought that was the end of it and I wasn't going to do anything with it. But during my time at Harvard, they had some MIT graduates there that was working in the innovation space. And while I couldn't obviously do anything about it because of COVID, I watched and I learned. And then I got to Texas Tech and they had a fabulous innovation ecosystem. And I started to see, again, the emails and advertisements and thought, I might want to kick this back up again and see where that goes. And so the whole team there kind of pushed us into something called Sling Health at first, and it paired me as a mentor. And then Julie, who was amazing, she was a medical student at the time, and then an engineering student, an MBA student. And we kind of worked in these little teams to work on a project and a problem that was healthcare related. And we started to improve this simulator that we had, and along the way, then I met you.
Right. Yeah. That's where our paths crossed. And I remember Phil Sizer telling me about you. And also during this time, and we didn't discuss this obviously, but I knew your name had changed and you were going through some personal things. And ordinarily I wouldn't dig here or go there, but because the story has gone the way it's gone, I want you to talk to us a little bit about your marriage and how that initially fell apart and now has obviously not. So talk me through that aspect of your journey.
Yeah. After, so he and I, we met in college and like I told you, we were married very early. I was 21, maybe almost 22, barely 22. And he was 24, when we got married. And like you've just heard you've heard a little bit of the story, but there was a lot of life lived and a lot of growing up that we did. And we were kids when we got married. We were barely out of college. And so then whenever we got to Lubbock and now we were starting to become grown up and deal with like real grown up things and dealing with the implications of COVID and dealing with building a house and dealing with a bit of identity crisis and myself. Let's be honest. I was really struggling with everything. Some PTSD that had happened during COVID and with imposter syndrome at work and not feeling like I really should be there. just not being sure of who I was as an adult and as a human. I really struggled. All those things combined, it just led us apart, and me especially. And so we ended up getting divorced. When we first were in Lubbock, we just moved into this huge, beautiful house that we built, the dream home, and it was empty inside, and I was empty inside. And so we still swore that we would be great co-parents and we'd always be family. And so we bought houses in the same neighborhood, and the neighborhood pool was in between, and we took the kids on vacations together to London and Iceland, and we did, all these things. We both dated as well. And for 2 years, we had a rhythm, and it turned out that over those 2 years, we were finally able to grow up. Me, and honestly, me more than him. He is a very self-assured and inwardly strong person. But he would tell you too, if he was sitting here, we both just were able as individuals to find ourselves, which really should have happened after college. And when we were younger, and in an ideal world, that's when it would have happened. But we had been so codependent on one another that we had been doing it alongside each other in an unhealthy way. And so over 2 years, that is what happened. And then at one point, we had the kids at the pool one day on a Sunday afternoon, and I'd actually taken a nap on his couch while he was doing stuff with the kids earlier. And I just woke up and I felt different. And we sat at the pool that day, and I looked at him and I kind of went through the checklist in my head of everything I was looking for in a life partner and who I was. And then I realized, you're who I'm looking for. Like the you now. And it like, you're looking for the me now. Like we didn't want the old us, but this you I love, and that me you love. And so, so we rekindled over the coming weeks. We got back together and we remarried this last August in France, in the south of France. We went to Normandy as a celebration for his 40th birthday. And then we went to Paris and saw the Olympics. And then we went to the south of France and got married with just a few friends and family. And it was absolutely wonderful.
Such a wonderful, I have goosebumps hearing you tell that story. Just the realization.
I'll let you know when the movie comes out, because I that's what I hear.
Yeah.
Is that, wow. It's like
I had a previous guest who was the subject for The Vow. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but she was involved in a car accident and suffered complete amnesia and didn't remember her courtship. Cricket Carpenter is her name, but they ended up re-dating and recording and then getting married again. So
that's a better story then.
No, your story's tremendous. I remember kind of watching from afar and seeing the pictures of kind of wedding 2.0. It was really awesome. And I was so happy for you both. Just really, really cool.
Thank you. We call it M2.
Yeah.
There's M1 and there's M2.
Yeah. Well, you've also built this social media presence. And I want to talk a little bit about this. West Texas is known for being tough and gritty. And probably not a place where a young blonde surgeon gets a ton of respect oftentimes. So you've become a voice for young women who are in the medical profession, for moms who are working. So talk to me a little bit about how that came about and what you're looking to do and where your social media presence is kind of taking.
Well, thank you. I don't consider myself to be at the forefront of that, but I have a decent following of people on Twitter, so I guess I am. But I realize, again, with what you were saying about like, we don't talk about it, we don't, all those things, that I had my first baby as a medical student. I had my second baby as a resident. And it was like, I mean, the first thing that one of my attendings told me was, well, you better make sure your co-residents are taking their birth controls.
Never I told him this pregnant. And then I had another attending say, oh, well, I thought you were getting chubby. So these are the types of
misogynistic humans that exist. And so if that's how they deal when you tell them you're pregnant, how much less about like, how are your kids and how are they doing? And I never felt like I could talk about my family and never felt like I could talk about being a mom when I was at work. And at conferences that I was going to, I was being asked to do presentations and I was being asked to do lectures and I was having my own research chosen. And it's like dark suit after dark suit after dark suit after somber. And we don't smile and we, are firm and gruff. And I always felt so out of place. And for the longest time, I felt like I was out of place because I didn't belong, but I felt like I didn't belong because I wasn't being me. And it turned out that once I started being me, then I felt like I belonged a lot more. I stood out a lot more, but I felt a lot more like myself. And that person can belong just as well.
So much to unpack here. First, in listening to this part during editing, I realized that while Brittany knew exactly what I was referring to about her being a young, blonde female surgeon in West Texas, I didn't exactly frame the question real well. In the time I spent working with both Brittany and her protege, Dr. Julie Chug at Texas Tech, I was shocked and appalled at some of the things that they shared about comments that were made not only by patients, but even by fellow physicians to young female doctors. Earlier in the interview, you also heard Dr. Bankhead allude to feelings of imposter syndrome that she had wrestled with coming out of an incredibly taxing fellowship at the height of the COVID pandemic. Given those things, hearing her talk about the stifling feelings of having to pretend to be this stuffy, formal, and gruff all the time person, it was a recipe for, at best, a difficult career in medicine. At some point, she turned to posting some of these challenges, along with inspiration for young doctors, especially women and mothers who were facing the same, or at least similar struggles themselves. It resonated. Today, she's a respected voice and a growing influencer on X with more than 14,000 followers. And her posts about balancing the many responsibilities of wife, mother, doctor, entrepreneur, they're inspiring not only to women, but to everybody. Over time, she found the strength to stop pretending to be someone she wasn't and embrace the someone she was. Her office, complete with fluffy stools, pink carpet, and poofy pink throw pillows on a comfy sofa, stands out. But it also serves as a visual representation of a woman who isn't afraid to be herself while working within the traditionally stuffy world of academic medicine. And with that vulnerability, she's opened the door to conversations with other young professionals who see her strength as inspiration to feel safe in letting their guard down a bit and to step into an authenticity that would have no doubt otherwise been stifled, shamed, or stigmatized just a generation earlier.
But I felt a lot more like myself, and that person can belong just as well. So my whole shtick with other women and men, like whoever, is that you can be who you are and still be professional. You can still be a loving, caring parent and want to show others a picture of your kid riding their bike or talk about picking them up that day and you're so excited. That's okay. And you can still be a professional surgeon at the same time. You can also wear a purple dress or a pink dress and still be a professional. Those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. And as you know, you can have a very pink office or pink pillows or whatever it is and still be a professional. Those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. So I think a lot of girls, well, I know a lot of girls have really identified with that. And even Julie, when Julie came to my office for the first time,
and saw that I had a pink rug and I opened up my laptop. It was a pink, like rose gold laptop. And she pulled open her pink rose gold laptop and said, oh, I can know this can happen. And I said, yeah, girl. Of course it can.
Tremendous. So we worked together for several months as part of that I-Corps project, and I considered it an honor to just watch the two of you interact. And the model of mentoring that I saw you deliver to her and subsequently watching her flourish, she's an incredible achiever to
She's
begin
incredible.
with. But to watch her flourish under your leadership was inspiring. And I know, hearing your story, you weren't on the receiving end of that kind of mentoring very often, but to turn that narrative around and deliver it to the next generation it's worthy of applause. I'm really so excited to have got the chance to see that. Well, you're not in Texas anymore. You're now in South Carolina. So talk to me about what you and your family are up to today.
Yeah. So I had been at Texas Tech for 4 years and was looking for something new and was needing to move forward. And I had talked with my division chief here a couple of times, and I came out and interviewed, and they brought Brian. They flew out Brian as well. And we stayed at the Charleston Place downtown, and we looked at houses, and I spoke with all the people here and heard about their camaraderie and their education model and their innovation and their leadership and their geography. I mean, let's be honest, it's beautiful here. And I was just smitten, like totally smitten. And I accepted the job and we moved here over the summer. And so I've been here now for 3 or 4 months and could not be happier. My leadership is stellar. I love working with the residents. I've got tons of support, and this place is absolutely beautiful. It's crazy to live in a place where people want a vacation like us.
Wild things.
Right.
The place is just beautiful. We go to the beach around once a month. It's
wonderful.
It's awesome.
It's a dream come true.
Well, after all you've been through, if you had a chance to speak some words of wisdom or encouragement into younger Brittany, what would you say to yourself?
Oh, man. Younger Brittany. You'd think I would have thought about this before, but I really haven't. And I guess a lot of what wish I could tell younger Brittany, I tell my kids. That probably is how it comes through. I would tell her, work hard, but it's okay to fail. And when you fail, just hold on to it and embrace it, because it means that you're going to learn something. So dig in and it's going to get better.
Yeah. Tremendous words of wisdom, young Brittany. Should listen well. We're getting close here. I love music and the emotions that it frequently represents. If we were to watch a montage of your life, what song would you pick to play in the background and why?
Oh my gosh. I love Eric Clapton's Change the World.
I can change the world. I need somebody in your universe.
Yeah, I mean, that's why. It's got good vibes and just the nostalgia of like,
you can change the world.
Yep.
Maybe not in the way people expect you to, but you can.
Yeah. Tremendous. Love it. I have basically a mixtape on Spotify of all my guests' song picks that I throw in there. So that'll go in there. You'll be on the list. Yeah. What for Dr. Brittany Bankhead remains undone?
Ooh. I can't stop, won't stop.
Wait,
I know that.
You haven't figured that out yet.
I love counseling. I will talk about, I love that about this generation now, because we talk about our counselors and we talk about our therapy. I'm in counseling now because maybe it's too much can't stop, won't stop. But my husband and I are set on this new entrepreneurial side of not just the simulator that you and I talked about, but now my husband has a business called RVU Guru that he is working and consulting to help other physicians maximize their business, to get more time with their families. I am also working with him on real estate and property management. And we have a set list of goals of being able to travel the world, spend like a month at a time overseas with our kids, learning different cultures, different languages. That is what I want for this basal life, and to be with him and to just appreciate one another, because we are so happy and I love him very much.
Such great things. And related to that, how can listeners connect with you? I'll drop links into the show description and notes, but tell us where we can find and follow your work.
Yes. So it's both on Twitter and on Instagram, the Bankhead, as in Brittany Bankhead, MD, both on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Dr. Brittany Bankhead, and I am undone.
I'm thankful to Dr. Bankhead for dropping in, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. For more info on today's episode, be sure to check it out on the web. Simply go to undonepodcast.com/EP108 to see the notes, links, and images related to today's guest, Dr. Brittany Bankhead. I know there are great stories out there to be told, and y'all, I'm always on the lookout. So if you or someone you know has a story that we can all be inspired by, tell me about it. You can either surf over to undonepodcast.com, click that contact tab in the top menu, drop me a note there, or check out my link tree at linktr.ee/Toby J. Brooks. Coming up on the show, I'll be taking a bit of a break from this show to close out the year. I've got a couple of new projects I'm working on, some interviews with some awesome new guests coming up. But for now, I'm wrapping up a month-long challenge to complete a solo podcast challenge, and I'll be working hard there for the next couple of weeks. If you'd be so kind to check out the Professor's Playbook, give a listen, and let me know what you think, that would be awesome. Otherwise, I'll most likely see you back here in 2025. This and more coming up on Becoming Undone. Becoming Undone is a Nitro Hype creative production written and produced by me, Toby Brooks. I have an assignment for you. Number 1, tell a friend about the show. Number 2, follow along on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Becoming UnDone Pod. And 3, listen, subscribe, and leave me a glowing 5-star best podcast I've ever listened to level review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Till next time, keep getting better.